But what scares me is that I come here to the place where British freedoms in the traditional sense I thought were still flourishing, and I see the same tendencies. Here too I see the executive expanding its power. I see this profusion of czars and of government task forces. I see this massive encroachment of the state into not only what should be the jurisdictions of the 50 states, but what should be the sphere of the private citizen. In this of all countries. If you hear a clanking sound, that is the noise of the shades of your founding fathers rattling as they look on what's being done in their name to the country that they founded. A country based around the maximum dispersal of power, now seeing in the name of contingency, in the name of emergency, this huge power grab by the government, by the state machine. Nationalisation, stimulus packages, bailouts, this huge squeezing of the private sector to engorge the state sector. This expansion of the state payroll, this building of a payroll vote of people who will then look to the state for every rise in life. In this of all countries, it's extraordinary that I should have to come here as a British politician and observe this phenomenon. All of us in the world have benefited because the United States has been a strong, prosperous, free country. And that carries with it some burdens and some responsibilities. And one of them is that we all then have an interest in your continued success. And so, if you want to go down this road towards British-style socialism, it's our problem as well as yours, my friends. Which is why I feel that I have some place in coming here to give a British response to the Tea Parties. But let me say this. The expansions of state power that we have seen under the last two presidencies, to be honest, I don't want to be partisan about this, are as nothing compared to what is now being proposed in the field of healthcare. And here too, I think I can come, as it were, from your future. Like the man in H.G. Wells' Time Machine, who comes panicking and running in saying, no, don't do it, there's still time. Don't go where I've been. Let me tell you about our system. Let me share some experiences as a friend and admirer of this country about the system that I and I see one or two of my student contemporaries in the room. They'll bear me out. They've lived on, well, one of them at least has escaped. I'm not sure. I'm not saying he did it only because of the NHS, but he's escaped to live here. But they'll bear me out on this. The National Health Service was founded in 1944. And that is a significant fact for this reason. The thinking that led to the socialization of healthcare was itself a product of a country that was fully mobilized for war. I'm not sure it could have happened at any other time. The NHS was founded when we had identity cards, when we had food rationing, when we had seized almost all of the productive industries in order to conscript them into the war effort, when we were indeed conscripting the entire male population into either the armed services or other forms of public works in order to win the battle for national survival. So we are talking about the time in British history when there was the most emphasis on the power of the state because of the exigencies of full mobilization and war. Now, of course, all of you know that when the government seizes power supposedly on a contingent basis, it is then often reluctant to return those powers when normal conditions apply again. And so it proved in the case of the Second World War. A whole bunch of powers were taken by the government supposedly for the one-off need of defeating Nazism, and then the state proved itself rather slow in handing them back. We had food rationing well into the 1950s. We had the continued state ownership of big industries well into the 1970s and 80s. And the NHS remains to this day with baleful consequences for those who live under it. The first thing that would strike you as American visitors, if you were reliant on our system, is the most extraordinary fact that almost anything that any complicated surgery or treatment begins with a queue. So the first step you take is not to decide, what kind of diagnosis and prescription you follow, but where to join the line. It is not uncommon to wait 6, 10, even 12 months for a knee operation, a hip replacement, or indeed medication. The second thing that would strike you is that hospitals are rather scary places. Depending on how you measure it, depending on which figures you believe, between 6 and 17,000 people were killed in the last 12 months in British hospitals by infections unrelated to the conditions which they went in to have cured. Hospitals are places where people pick up bugs and die. We're returning to the medieval idea of a hospital as a place where you go to die rather than a place where you go to be made well. Now, I'm not saying that that is a unique property of the British system. Of course, there are dirty hospitals in every system, even in yours, right? Man is fallen, we are imperfect. But the unique quality of the British system is that there's nothing you can do about it. There's no avenue for you to claim redress. Certainly there's no opportunity for you to shop around and try and go somewhere better. It is an exactly Marxist system. I use that word advisedly. I'm not using the word Marxist as a kind of general swear word in the way that some of your commentators do about I'm using the word Marxist to mean what Marx meant. Contributions according to ability, distribution according to need. Right? The National Health Service is funded out of general taxation, and that's the only money that comes into it. There is then absolutely no price mechanism within the system. So you, as the patient, have effectively no rights whatever as a consumer. You are treated as a supplicant and are expected to be grateful for anything you get. Exactly as happened in the Soviet system. And again, I don't make this parallel with communism lightly. I'm quite conscious and clear in what I'm saying. Up until 1989, there were several systems in Europe that resembled the British NHS in their structure. Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Poland, Romania, and so on. All of them have now been abolished except the British NHS. Ours is carrying on. Fidel Castro lies dying under some mosquito net in Cuba. When he goes, ours is going to be the last one. Well, ours and North Korea, maybe. Right? How can that be? How can that be that we are still sticking to a patently underperforming system when we can see that our survival rates, our outcomes, are demonstrably worse than those of other Western countries? You know, you're not just better off as an American if you fall ill. You are better off as, a Maltese, a Spaniard, a Slovenian, countries which have a much lower GDP than ours, but where there is a maximization of resources because there is some price mechanism, which means that within a limited budget, where there's only so much to go around, resources are allocated efficiently. Why are we still sticking to this? Part of it is innate conservatism. It's part of human nature that you can always be more easily frightened of change than encouraged by it. It's always easier to scare people into sticking to the status quo than to inspire them with a vision of something better if they change. And this is the case particularly within the field of healthcare because people have been misled deliberately by the people who run the system into believing that the giving of healthcare to people who are poor is a unique property of the NHS and doesn't exist in any other country in the world. Now, that is not true. I mean, you know that isn't true. But in the United Kingdom, it is almost universally believed that 50 million Americans are not getting any healthcare. That they're kind of dragging their broken legs behind them because they can't afford to go and get them treated. Now, I mean, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's been a whole bunch of people in the last couple of days who've been dragging their broken legs behind them that I just haven't seen. But that is not my understanding of how your system works. And of course, most British people don't see that. Most of them don't come here. So all they've seen is Michael Moore waddling around in his film saying, oh, it's terrible. Under our system, unless you're very rich, you're going to die. So that is one of the things that has pushed people into a small c conservatism. The other is a question of simple numbers. And the reason I say this is because a couple of people in the last few days have said to me, well, maybe it won't be so bad. We've got the government off its original proposal. They're now going to go for this rather more scaled-down cooperative thing. My friends, that is how it starts. And then it expands, and it squeezes out every other option. Because a state-backed system that is funded by the taxpayer is not competing on a level playing field with the private ones.